G'day and welcome to the Inforunners. I'm Execute. Today I'm joined by my partner in crime, Algared. How you doing, buddy?
Oh well, can't complain too much. No one listens when you do, so it doesn't matter.
I'm sweating bullets. I don't know about you, but it is way too hot, and I want to turn the air conditioning back on, so we've got to get the show over and done with. No.
Yep.
But
So,
Rez,
when you're rushing, that's why it's nothing to do with trying to speed the show up and get a short show. It's just to do with comfort and inability to cope because it's very hot. Not too hot here at the moment, but it was a very very hot night, so I'm feeling absolutely RS because I'm just so
right, enough
desperate
about the
tired.
weather. Rez,
Yeah.
how are you, mate?
I'm doing pretty good. Nice to finally talk to y'all.
Yep, likewise. Um, I'm going to be honest with your fleet, Rez. I struggled with this one. There were some really weird choices that we had to kind of make because you basically kind of came to us and said you were into combat support, and I think you've spent way more money than you needed to. And because of that, I would normally recommend someone diversify into different types of gameplay. So for me, this was a bit of a different one. Algrid, what about your thoughts on it before we kind of kick it in?
When I know when Riz first came into the channel and said, "Hey, this is my fleet," I was wondering if you guys could give us a hand with it. And I looked and I thought, "Hey, this is an interesting fleet, based on the desire to be for an org and doing org support and org combat logistics slash style of things." And when I looked at it, I could see where you were going with a lot of the stuff, but also the in terms of the bang for buck, it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Um, But I can remember reading the chat and people saying, "Oh, why you got so many of this? Why you got two of this?" And I could say, "Yeah, it made perfect." Was no query on my mind. I could see why you had done it, but it was just that bang for buck aspect that was there, and then some holes that I thought were missing there in terms of that as well. So, as I
All
said,
right,
interesting fleet.
I'll flick it over to the browser. This is basically normally we get them to go through every single ship they have and why. Might do that for some of them, but not all of them. Basically that whole front row I've lined up there, that's what we ended up cutting. And regular viewers of the channel can probably understand why we did that. There are some in there that we looked at that may be the alien ones and stuff like that, but again, they're made for the human market, so we kind of moved those. Um, why have a core drilling sampler Odyssey and there's no miner? So that was really weird for me. You agree with that, Algrid, I'm assuming?
Yeah, in terms of the combat support and everything else, but I think that's one of those ships that's worth hearing where Rez was
Mm,
looking at and wanting to understand where it was coming from, and
yeah.
then looking at why we've also got it there and
Mm,
where we see the value or where we see those aspects
yeah.
that he was looking for being filled by other ships.
I guess in hindsight, you could kind of pair it with a Pioneer, um,
Mm,
for just the building the mining bases, but the Pioneer can be paired with other things as well. So I found that a
yep.
weird one. Um, but things like there was no Liberator. Um, we went through and looked at some other stuff as well. So um, can you I don't know how to do this, Agate. I'm kind of thinking like we just get him to go through and tell us like I might clump some of the ships together. So, can you give us some of your thoughts, Rez, on why you brought so many small fighters? We'll start there. So everything like the
Oh,
Merl,
okay.
the Merlins, the Buccaneer, the two defenders, the Santokii, and the Cartwell, like those type of things.
Well, and I was going for an aspect of when I bought the Defenders, when I got two of them, I was going, every time I saw a Banu Merchantman, I always saw two Defenders around it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is before they came out with the hangars for the Banu Merchantman. I thought that maybe it would have a place to park both of them since every time you see one, they always had two Defenders with it. The
So,
the Katakia, go ahead.
no, I was just yeah, keep going.
The call to all was a scout, and I like I've had hard times with the regular human fighter ships, and I got really good with the Kal-Tal.
Okay.
Like it's a very maneuverable. It can turn on a dime. It can fly in any direction you need to go.
So I'm assuming that's a similar thing for the Buccaneer because that's kind of fairly mobile as well.
Yes.
Yeah. What about the Merlins and the Archimedes? Tell us about those.
Well, when I got the Merlins and the Archimedes, I was thinking of, okay, we're out of quantum. I have my carrot. I need ships to do security routes around the fleet while we're sitting still. And I like the carrot has that small hangar bay in the back.
So
These ships,
basically they were for lookouts, yeah? They were like just scouting in the area. Yeah, okay.
yes.
What about the two retaliators? Why a base and why a bomber? Why not just
Well,
one?
the bomber is dedicated for the bombing role. The base
Yep.
would have been more of a quick, with the module for the dropship module and the cargo, it would be a quick in and out. Let's drop them here with ammo and supplies, let them do their scouting, and then the ship's out of there before you even knew it was there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What?
And then for me, why the Taurus and the Hull B and Hull A?
Well, when I was talking to my org about this, we kind of came up with the concept that the Hull A, when it's fully collapsed, could fit inside the small hangar of the Kraken. But later, that's why I got it, because I was going to collapse it, put it inside the hangar of the Kraken, and then when I needed to go from ship transferring supplies from the Kraken to the battle on the planet, I could use the whole A to fly in between. Instead of having to bring the whole Kraken down, I could bring the supplies down and have the Kraken sit in orbit.
Okay, I can actually see that one. What about the starter profession ship? So like the Terrapin, the Vulcan, the Vulture, and the Prospector. Is that just so you've got your finger in every type of industrial gameplay?
Well, like when I got the Vulcan, I was looking at the Crucible, and I thought, well, maybe if the Crucible's busy fixing one ship, or I have the Crucible busy off somewhere else doing a job, I could use the Vulcan to go around and do the small repairs with the drones, fixing my fleet ship, my org ships, and fixing like minor damages. Like if a gun got damaged, I could have a
Yep.
drone go out and fix that.
And the others?
Well, the Vulture was going to be easy storage on the Kraken. Like if after a combat situation, my my job in the org would be come in and mop up what was left.
Yep.
So
Mm-hmm.
I would use the Vulture to go around and look at the ships in the fleet, see which ones are damaged. If I can't fix that certain spot, use the Vulture to scrap the outline to make it more suitable for repairs, along with
And
the
and things that are outside combat support, like the Terrapin, I guess, is more scouting. But what about the Prospector? What's the thoughts behind that?
the Prospector was to go out and like if I'm sit in a situation where I see an asteroid field next to me, the Prospector's job would have been to fly from the Kraken over to the asteroid field and start mining resources so we could bring them back to the Kraken to store for take them back and making a quick buck in the area.
Okay. All right.
But that's before I found out.
Yeah. So that's all the ones that we're kind of removing. And I think the bigger ones I'll kind of leave because we can talk about that again when we get over to the other side. But
And before we do go on, like saying we're removing these ships or cutting them, it's not saying they're not good. Having the P-52s in the small hangar of the Kraken or on that, and being able to use them as local defense, great idea. But when you're looking for bang for buck, when you're looking at the price of those ships compared to the vehicles, and you look at the Buccaneer, not the Buccaneer, the Dragonfly being at moment in game like 30 or 40,000, and you're looking at a rock miner being 70,000. Even if they triple the price, even if the price quadruples, you're still looking at a rock miner being 280 or 300,000, and a P52 or even an Archimedes is still going to be most likely within that range. And so they're types of ships to buy in game if you're looking for bang for buck. If you don't really
Realistic.
bother, then having them there is no problem. But when you're looking for bang for buck, which is what we do on the show, they're ships for the chopping block.
And realistically, you can take one of those big ships up there, do one mission with them, and buy quite, a couple of these very, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be from the same profession. So you could take a Crucible and earn a Vulture. You could take a Crucible and earn a Terrapin, but you can also use it to get the same profession, which is the Falcon. So when you've got the bigger one, you don't really need the smaller one, because once you get in game, that bang buck mentality, you're better off to put into a new profession and just get all the big ones of the profession. Anyway, so what we did was this. And there may be some more changes to this down the line. So one of the things was he actually had a whole E in buyback. But we may find when we work a bit more through him that a C or a D is more appropriate for his needs. But he does have one in buyback, so we utilize that at this stage. Algared, what are the highlights for you, if you want
to? For me, probably the reason why we've got the D or the E is simply because Rez says I'm a long hauler. That's my bread and butter. That's the thing I like to do. And so his desire to do fleet support, logistics, just makes sense to have a long hauling ship. And he had the A and the B, but he didn't have anything really larger. His biggest hauling ship was his BMM, and that doesn't really, even though it can do the long hauling, it's kind of like a hull C. It's totally different aspect because it's got that merchant aspect as well. So, so for me, adding a long hauling ship there really seemed to fit with what he was actually looking for in terms of his fleet and what he was saying he was after.
So a couple of highlights for me. Taking the Odyssey, getting a CCU for $25 and turning it into the Nautilus allows him to support the fleet before the battle, not just during and after. So he can put down the mines, get a defensive barrier going and stuff like that. He mentioned the Vulture and that he wanted to use that to go out after a battle. Well, again, the Reclaimer is bigger and better, and you can, again, that bigger mentality where you can very quickly earn the smaller ones underneath. So that Reclaimer is essentially all the ships underneath it. And again, that's going to be much better in a battle, and after a battle, and it pairs very well with the Crucible, where they can feed each other. So if the ship's not good enough to be restored, then it goes to the Reclaimer, and if you can restore it somehow, the Crucible can start repairing it and even take further resources off the Reclaimer. And lastly for me would be the Liberator, because that is very much combat support.
Yeah, and when one of the things that came up when we were talking with Rez was that he was saying when he wanted to do the combat support, it was kind of that combat support, logistics, and industry. And by industry was meaning the aspects that went along with that combat support. And I could see the Starfarer being there to harvest fuel and refine fuel. What I see still missing in this fleet is a mining vehicle to be able to gather those the container and bring it to the Starfarer to refine. That really pairs well with that idea of rearm, repair, refuel. Same with Reclaimer. The Reclaimer is a classic ship for that. After the battle of going through, and you're not only are you stripping off the components that are repairable, you're stripping off the weapons that are repairable, stripping out the ammunition, taking out the fuel. But you're also ripping apart the ship and turning into components, which, as Execute said, the Crucible would use to repair ships. Any of those components or weapons you repair that you're not using on your fleet, you can chuck in your merchantman and sell them off. So to me, though, that synergy of those ships just works works well. Now, I know people are going to say, but they're all big ships and they're all massive crew. And you've got to remember, we were asked, help me fix my fleet for my org. This is my contribution to my org, and these are the ships that the org will be using. And so,
and some of
the
those ones
crew
that
questions kind of dropped off, didn't they?
I was just going to say, sorry, the some of those things, like why the miners are not there as well, is that there are other people in the org that would take care of that. So that's why this is so kind of tailored in one direction. And I did struggle with it, honestly, because I still think you're better off to cover all your bases and get generalized gameplay. Rez, how do you feel after we've talked through this with you, and are you happy with the outcome, or you're not happy with it? You just tell us your thoughts, mate.
I mean, after y'all explained to me, like y'all said, with the bigger ships, I can easily go buy in game the small ships that I want. And when you showed me where I could save money or make more suitable decisions for the org, I really am happy with the results that y'all showed me. I mean, like you said, the Reclaimer's better than the Vulture. The Nautilus would be a better choice than the Odyssey because I could prep for a battle before we went into a battle.
Yeah.
And I know you were talking about the Odyssey as being that ship that you and your mates could just hang out in and kind of live in when you're just doing the game. But I really think, ships like your BMM are going to offer you exactly the same option.
And we also know his org leader has an 890 jump.
Yeah.
So they would both be better options, wouldn't they, Algared, in this case?
Yeah. In terms of the hanging out, I think the even the 890, I think, is a better option than an Odyssey. You look at even the scanning suite, but it's actually stated as being in the 890 jump. It's a Wilsop.
I think I think the ship that would be on the chopping block would be the Perseus here. Because you've also got the Nautilus and the Polaris that kind of do cover that quite a bit.
Yep.
And like you said, Algared, if it wasn't that price it is, I'd probably almost suggest an Orion, just because it does cover that last really big industrial thing that he doesn't have. But again, it probably is something you can buy in game, like having the Kraken, the Merchantman, the Pioneer, and the the Hull E and the Polaris that are all bigger ships than it. He could probably use any one of those to get it, though, if he wanted to. That's not saying the Perseus is a bad ship. It's just not bang for buck. But it kind of survived this transition, I think, because we were trying to tailor it so heavily to combat support. And I think the other thing we said about that Perseus was when the heavy, the medium carrier comes along, that's the one that would probably recommend you chop and turn into that.
Yeah. And as I was looking at the next two ships I'd be looking at converting or changing for me was also the Genesis Starliner. Now, for me, I've said in the past, that's my last best hope for a ship that fits into the Crusader line. For me, it was one of those ships that really tickled the fancy. It was variable, it was modular, it just ticked all those boxes. But in terms of that combat support, I can see it not really being there, and I can see it being used to transport massive troops.
And that's the reason it survived, was that potential or promised, I can't remember which one it was, military transport one, and just logistically transporting those troops.
But I could see that role being filled by other ships in that fleet. And so for me, if I was looking for other ships to melt or to convert to other ships, that would be one of the ships that I'd be looking at, looking at moving, so that I wasn't needing to put more money in.
But it does
get the best bang for buck. But that's not saying those ships are not good.
Yeah, it does give him that different, like, just left of field of that long haul trucking thing too. Except he's like transporting livestock, if you get what I mean, instead of cargo containers. You get where I'm going from there. So yeah, I think that kind of wraps that one up. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Rez, before we sign off?
I mean, I've sat down and actually looked at what y'all said, and when I went back to my account last night, I did sell off a bunch of ships, and I did come up with more money to what y'all quoted what y'all said that would be the difference between my original fleet and what the upgrades should be. I mean, not should be, but more y'all suggestions.
All right, good. Anything you would like to add?
Just to reiterate that idea that when we're saying ships are no good or not good for a fleet, we're not saying they're bad ships. We're not saying you don't want them in your fleet. We are really specifically looking at that bang for buck. And I know a lot of people always say the big ships, and you don't think of the crew. And in this fleet particularly, we weren't worried too much about the crew because this was specifically being tailored for his fleet that was working with his org. And so in that aspect, we didn't really worry about that. But by our considerations, we do always consider.
And
But
you'd have to we've talked with his org, and we're pretty sure that the other gaps that he doesn't have are going to be filled. Wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Like this type of video, like this type of content, really does help us out. Subscribe, support us on Patreon if you want to do that as well. We do have a gentleman.
Hit that like button. You know,
we do have a comments. We do have a gentleman that's been converting our episodes into podcast format on Anchor. I'll try and leave a link in the description below. So those of you that don't want to actually see our ugly mugs and just want to listen to it, you can do that too. And that'll be both on the Fix My Fleets and the regular shows and all that stuff. Anything else, Algared? Or have I hit it all?
Leave your comments. We do read every comment. I'm sure Rez would be interested to see what your thoughts are in terms of where his fleet is, what he's doing, and also your thoughts on our suggestions.
You are just trying to delay me getting to my air conditioner. I can now see through your evil plan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm evil. I know.
All right. So the voice in the void's been Rez. He's been, I don't know, Evil Al, and I've been Excellent Execute, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Take care.
Bye, everyone. Oh, man, I already said see you in the next one. Oh, man, it's the hot. I'm getting heat deprivation. What it is.
Say bye, Rez.
Later. Hope you have a nice day.